Prof, lawyer, teacher, professor. You're a parent too. Father. I yield.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me start at the very outset to acknowledge the family of the late Dr. William Odongo Omamo, and also acknowledge my very good friend who is present with me to render the other keynote address which he has done on the occasion of the launch of this book, written posthumously in honor of Dr. Odongo Omamo. Let me also acknowledge Mzee Lesirma, whom I've known for many years and who has had the opportunity of serving this nation in various capacities, and who in his brief remarks reminded us of his interaction with the late Omamo. Let me also acknowledge those who have taken time to be present with us this evening. And I particularly want to acknowledge Bob, because what he has done jointly with the family is something that very few have done in this country. He undertook a task of ensuring that the life and times of William Odongo Omamo is immortalized. When he sent the manuscript to me very early on to read through, I was delighted because I could relate with quite a number of things which now find themselves in the book. I could relate with them because, as I told him and unknown to him, what is recorded in pages 105 to 106 is something that had been narrated to me by my father times without number. That is how Dr. Omamo met Joyce Achola. I told to him he did not know that Joyce Achola and my father are first cousins, and that in fact their eldest sister, Tabitha Alo, was named for my grandmother Alo, because Alo and Chama were the daughters of Omolo, and my father is Omolo, named for the grandfather. He was pleasantly surprised, or so I assumed. I also reminded him that quite a number of the stories that are rendered in the book are familiar to me, and that I remember what is now recorded in the final copy at pages 255, how his mother joined the family. And I could remember, and that is not included, I remember very early on, in 1972, I was a student at Usenge Primary School. And your mother, Anne, was also a student several years ahead of me and was an accomplished netball player. And I remember in 1972, your father, Odongo Omamo, was a visitor at Usenge Primary School. And I can remember that the students were gathered under the big tree that he mentions in that book, Tamarindas indicus, the chua tree. And I can remember that your mother was one of the students who was being awarded on that day for her performance in netball. And I can now begin to imagine that perhaps it is on that day that his eyes started wandering. But of course, that is not told in that story. In other words, it is a book and a story that I can relate to. And I was very glad and very humbled when he requested me to write the foreword, which is to be found in Roman pagination 5 and 6 of the book. And his own contribution and that of the family is also rendered in that book. And you will have occasion to read it in pages 6 through to Roman 9, in which he explains how that book came about and came alive. And I say in the foreword that what has happened is a great thing. When you read the foreword, my experience is that many people will buy the book and will never read it. But I urge you to read it. It is a story well told and of a great man. And it did not allow me to even hesitate when I thought about it to use the word Colossus to describe Odongo Omamo. He truly, metaphorically and literally bestrode the Kenyan political scene like the fabled Colossus. And I did not hesitate when, as I say in my foreword, when I related his entry into the arena, both politically and otherwise, to the famous story that is told of Gaius Julius Caesar, when he very easily at the famous Battle of Zela achieved a battle within a day, and he said, Vene vidi vici, I came, I saw, and I conquered. It can be said of Omamo that he came, he saw, and conquered many places. And the beauty of the story is that it is a fountain of knowledge. It tells the younger generation is that you must be rooted in what you do. And that is why he starts with his very foundation. Whose child was he? And in an era where ethnicity now rules the roost, he says that if you want to find the purity of Luo blood in him, you will not find it. Because he can trace his ancestry to the Gusi or the Abagusi of this nation. And he tells the story well. I urge you to read about Odongo Omamo and his juvenile escapades in Sakwa, which neighbors my own rural home in Imbo. It has also not been said, but when you talk about oration in this country, he was one of the greatest orators that this country has ever produced. In fact, I dare say, those of you who had the occasion to listen to him speaking in the Luo language, he was a joy to listen to. I remember so very vividly when the politics of this country was still tame. And I'm suggesting to this audience that over the years our politics has degenerated, because I can remember in 1979, during the campaigns when politicians were campaigning, they held joint rallies. And you rose and spoke, and once you had spoken, then your opponent spoke, and you carried away your audience by force of reason. And Aruthi was capable of doing it. I remember being at a rally at Usenge Beach when his opponent was a man called Okello Ndisi. And Okello spoke first. That was his misfortune. And when he had spoken, he claimed that he was the tilapia which was being eaten by everybody, and on that ground alone he should be elected. He said it in Luo. It's more beautiful in Luo. He said, "Nani ngege pinje chuero." So when Omamo rose, he said, "No kelo kandisini. Okunge, do you know him? Was he not the man who was employed and was in charge of human resource?" It wasn't called human resource. He was a personnel manager. Then he said, this Okello Kandisi, who was in charge of human resource, who has he ever employed? Of course, he was exaggerating. And then he asked the audience, has he ever employed anybody? The audience said no. Then he went on and said, "No kelo kandisini engege pinje chuero. Ose chuere imbo, ose chuere sakwa, ose chuere game, tindo rumo, okelo rumo, koro ongegi michuero." He was telling them, and this is just a play on words. He was the quintessential orator. I'm happy that his oratorical skills are mentioned in the book. And when this generation and generations yet to be born read of this great man, it will be said of him that he was a great orator, but with content. Some of you may also not know that the name Kaliech, or the moniker by which we now know him as Kaliech, had many meanings. But I remember at one time when he was lamenting, that was in 1988, when there were huge political rallies and he was rigged. He then said that when the rallies are organized, the people biro Kaliech. They come like an elephant. Tokagigo mbulu togigo kapuoyo. But when they vote, it's like the rabbit. That was his ability to play with words. Intellectually agile. Udongonya imbo. That was a great man. And history will remember him fondly. And I'm quite certain that if he is upstairs, he's looking on this occasion, and he's saying, "Behold, I left good children who have done a good thing to immortalize me." So the book talks about Odongo's heritage, but he also talks about the cosmology of his Luo peoples. And I want you to take time to read pages 27 through to 28. When he talks about the different peoples, the different artists, he calls it superstition. But those of who are younger, it takes you into a world that introduces you into what would be called Luo spirituality. Because later he talks about his Christian foundations, but he does not disconnect with the root. I urge you to read that. He talks about his education, and my good friend Dr. Barak Muluka has also mentioned that those who seek never fail to find. He sought at a time when he was going to school, and Nzele Sirma will tell you there are many who tried to go out of 10. Perhaps it is only 2 that succeeded. And indeed, when he mentions the few individuals, and I urge you to read that on page 122, when he mentions the people in Maseno that were, in his view, material for university education, this was only a very small and select group. He walked the path of greatness through the furnace of trials and tribulation. Because there are many great individuals out there, but greatness does not grow on trees. Greatness must be nurtured and watered by hard work. And that is the story that he is telling us. The spirit of never say die. He talks about the family, his family that he loved. And if there was one man that respected the divine instruction, go ye and fill the earth, it was a Ruthie. He did it. And he filled the earth with good men and women. I listened to Tom, and I could see the elements of Kaliech as he spoke. He was wedded to his word. I listened to Bob. I could see a chip of the old block. I listened to Rachel. I know the one for whom you are named. We called her Ryle. But of course, as you got more anglicized, it became Rachel. And it's a chip of the old block. You have done your father proud. And the beauty of this book is that it humanizes Dr. Omamo. There is the tendency when books are written, and I've had the advantage of reading a few of the autobiographies or biographies written. And I've said it in my foreword, they are hagiographical. They present the character as if they were not without any blemish. In Kaliech, we see the frailties of a human being. And out of those frailties, we see the rise of a great man whom, as I've said, and allow me to repeat, bestrode this country like a colossus. He's told us about his journey. He's not afraid to mention the persons who assisted him in his rise. In other words, as you climb, you lift, and you are lifted. There is a basketball player, and I was surprised that basketball players in the United States can make such wise statements, but he did. Dikembe Mutombo of the Democratic Republic of Congo said rightly that when you use the elevator to go up, send the elevator down so that it can carry others. The testimony that we have heard from Zele Silma, the testimony that we have heard is that he also lifted others. My memory still serves me well. I first personally interacted properly with Dr. Omamo in 1978. I was a Form 4 student, believing that I could change the world and I could start from the village. He was then, I believe, a member of parliament, and I remember I had founded an organization, the West Yimbo Youth Organization. My cousin here will remember. And I invited him courageously to be the guest of honor in that Arambe in Usenge. And he did arrive. And I remember that we raised 50,000 Kenya shillings in 1974. And I remember that we bought a parcel of land which is there up till now. I then interacted with him in 1981 when he was the Minister of Agriculture. And this is how I think I then started interacting with him a lot more intimately. We went there as Bondo Students Association. We were young at the university and thought we could change the world, as I've already said. We sat in his office at the reception and we were served with tea and other bitings which we consumed ravenously. As we were leaving, he tried to give us each 500 shillings and we refused. He was shocked. We were university students, but we said, no, we don't want money. We want you to be our patron. And he agreed to be our patron. I'm telling you all these stories to underline the fact that in the book you also see his humility. And humility is the mother's milk of greatness. Tom talked about it, that when you are humble, the more you know, the more you know you do not know. When you meet any individual who claims that he is learned and he is arrogant, that is a fool. Because it is only foolishness that makes anybody believe that they know everything. And you will see that in the book. His appetite, his large appetite for knowledge. And I'll tell you a story which is not in the book. You know, Dongo is called Wenya Imbo because the mother is from Imbo. And where is one of my cousins here? Yeah, but I'll tell the story. There was a time when he came for a political rally and the people of Imbo thought that his words were a little uncharitable. So they put together a delegation of 5 individuals to go to his farm in Sakwa, in Kapio, to make representation that they were unhappy with him. That was in 1982, and there had been an attempted coup, and we were at home for about 1 year. And I happened to be in that meeting taking the minutes for the old men. And I was asked and detailed to accompany the men to Kapio. And when we arrived, he did not appear. But the individuals who were sent were served with all manner of good food and all manner of drinks. When he arrived, he overwhelmed them, and the message was not delivered. So as we were going back, they started blaming each other. What are we going to say back at home? And it taught me one thing. When you are a leader, when people visit you, don't meet them before they have eaten. It is one of the ways of disarming them. Because once they have eaten their food, once they have eaten your food, they will not contradict you. I think many Kenyan politicians, including Mzee Sirma, know that trick. So one can go on, but this is a great occasion. We are gathered here to remember a great man. We are gathered here because that great man has been immortalized in the written word. We are gathered here because that great man lived a life that is worth immortalizing. We are gathered here because that great man had children who have had the wisdom and the courage and the determination to ensure that his work is midwifed into what it is now. We are here today, several years after his departure from this earth, to say of him that he was a great man. In this world, there are many who come, and their greatest claim to fame is that they were born and that they died. In between their birth and death, there is nothing unremarkable. We are here, therefore, to remind ourselves that in this life that recognizes and acknowledges certificates, let it not be said of you that the only certificates you acquired in your life were the birth certificate for which you did not work, or the baptismal certificate for which you may not have worked, and the death certificate which will be issued after you are gone. In between, there are many certificates to be earned. And those certificates come in different forms. They come through the lives that you touched. Kaliech came. He was known by different names. He was called Aruthi. He was named after a person called Aruthi. Those who know the Luo language, when you are called Aruthi, it can mean many things. But the meanings notwithstanding, it only points in one direction, that you are a man who cannot be taken for granted. Irudhogik moko. If you want to claim that it is an English word, you can claim it is a synonym of ruthless, but that is untrue. But it's explained the same thing. He was called Kaliech because he lived his life with a big spoon, and he lived it. But I want to conclude with this. The first time that I ever saw a motor vehicle that rises and goes down was when Odongo Omamo came to Senge with Citroën. How many of you saw the old Citroën, which we call Citron? That car, and some of you may have been driven it. Tom, were you there when it was there? When you get into it, don't confuse it with the Probox. It was a different ball game. It rises. And those who were energized said, one day I want to drive this. Odongo Omamo inspired many people in different ways. As a farmer, those of you who have had the advantage of visiting his farm, you'll see what he has done. And he did it at a time when very few people believed that it could be done. He says in his book that when he grew up, he did not know that Sakwa was in the rain shadow. And it is. But that notwithstanding, he did what had to be done. Today, when I travel across Nyanza, go to any school that is worthy of attention, you'll find a foundation stone laid by William Odongo Omamo, particularly when he was the Minister for Natural Resources. You who are here, as I conclude, must now ask yourselves, young and old, when you are dead and gone, what will be said of you? Will it be said of you like Kaliech, that you came, you saw, and conquered? Will it be said of you when you pass, as is said of great men in West Africa, that the great Iroko tree has fallen? Will it be said of you that you left a mark in the lives of men? This is an occasion to introspect. Today, we are here because William Odongo Omamo is dead. Long live William Odongo Omamo Kaliech. God bless him wherever he is, and God bless all of us who are here to memorialize him and to immortalize him. Once again, Robert, you've done a good thing. The Omamo family, you've done a good thing. In many families in this country, when a patriarch departs, what we hear is scramble for material wealth. Of the Omamo family, we have not heard. What we hear, which is a testament to a good patriarch, is that he left unfinished business, and we have finished it. May God bless you. Thank you.